Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. All praise due to Allah, may He send His prayer and blessings upon our Prophet Muhammad, his family, and his companions. Alhamdulillah, as we mentioned in our previous session about the scholars of Islam and the importance of studying their biographies and knowing what we want to achieve from this study. How do we look at these narrations or these statements and their lives and so forth? I will mention many of the benefits. There are examples for us. We should look and see how they did things, how they responded to questions, how they dealt with their teachers, their students, to the end. So, inshallah ta'ala, this is what we will do ta'ala, in these few minutes. We are going to look at the life of one of the Imams, ta'ala, and that is the Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Thabit, since he was the first Imam of the four Imams of the famous schools of fiqh, al-madhahib al-arba'a. So his biography will be the biography I will start with, ta'ala. But as we mentioned, this is something brief. We will not cover obviously every aspect of his life. Even the issues that we'll talk about, it'll be brief. There are many aspects of his life and scholars in general that are important, depending on the study of the person or which angle they're looking at. Is it the person's strength in hadith or in fiqh or in the language or their aqidah, or a combination of all of that, or their akhlaq or their da'wah, whatever it is. So of course, when you write biographies, they may focus on many things, but they may focus on certain things. And here we're going to go in brief certain aspects of his life, in brief, I'll give you an idea of this Imam. There is no doubt that the scholars have mentioned, or they have written many books about these Imams, and one of them is Abu Hanifa, Rahmahullah ta'ala. So we will begin, as we mentioned, with something brief about him. Wait, let's begin with his name. This is the most important thing, one of the most important things, even though it may seem like that's strange to say. But many of us, we may know the names of some of the Imams, or we may know what they were known for, meaning that some scholars were known for their kunya, Abu so-and-so or so-and-so, she's a woman. Or they may be known for their family name, or where they were from, or something else, an attribute of them. And for example, Al-A'mash, he was a scholar of Islam, and because of something with his sight, he was known to be called Al-A'mash. That wasn't his name. And the same goes for Al-A'raj, Rahman al-Hurmuz, which is one of the teachers of Abu Hanifa. He was known for Al-A'raj. He has a limp, he had something with his foot. So we have to know the names of the scholars. So when we read about them, or we hear someone quoting from them, we know who they're talking about. For example, Abu Hanifa is known for Abu Hanifa. That's kunya. What is his name? His name is Nu'man ibn Thabit, Kufi or Taymi. This is in brief, as we said, we don't go into depth and details about that. But what's important is to know that his name is Nu'man ibn Thabit, and Abu Hanifa is known by the name of Abu Hanifa or his kunya. And an example for this is At-Tabari, the famous Imam of Tafsir. Many of us may know him by the name of At-Tabari, but when Ibn Kathir quotes from him, a lot of times he says, Qala Abu Ja'far. That's his kunya. Who is Abu Ja'far? Somebody may read and be like, who is Ibn Kathir talking about? He's talking about At-Tabari, the same person that you already know. But because you've known him, or he's famous by his name, or this laqab, or At-Tabari, or the family name, then you may not know who he's talking about. So anyhow, Abu Hanifa, But the next point we want to go through in brief is some of his shuyukh. There are many shuyukh of Abu Hanifa. And knowing the scholars of a student of knowledge or a scholar is important because it gives you an idea of their background, their way of thinking. In many cases, it's not necessarily always the case, but in most cases, it helps in knowing where this person came from, what type of background they have, and so forth. So we see Abu Ata ibn Abi Rabah, Al-Sha'bi, Abdurrahman ibn Hurmuz, who was known by the name of Al-A'raj, Amr ibn Dinar, Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. Nafi' was the freed slave of Ibn Umar, famous scholar, one of the most famous narrators and seerah students of Ibn Umar. Qatada, we found one of the Imams and mountains of knowledge and narration of hadith, Ahmad ibn Abi Sulaiman, which was his scholar of fiqh. We learned from him the fiqh. Ibn Umayr, Ja'far al-Baqir, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, Imam al-Zuhri, famous Imam, scholar of hadith al-Madani, Ibn al-Munkadir, Ishaq al-Sabi'i, famous scholar of hadith, and others. Anyhow, these are some of the names of the teachers of Imam Malik. The students also there are many famous students. Razzaq ibn Hammam from Yemen, who was the Shaykh Imam Ahmad, Ahmad ibn Abi Hanifa, which was his son, Zufar ibn Hudayl, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, and these were some of his famous students. Waqi' ibn al-Jarrah, the famous Imam. Qadi Abu Yusuf was also one of Abu Hanifa's famous students. He was known to be the judge for Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf. So also there are many students, but as we mentioned, this is just a brief introduction to give us an idea of how many students. Now we want to mention something about Abu Hanifa and the respect of knowledge in his people. As we mentioned, we're going to mention some of the statements that are related to Abu Hanifa. And the reason why I prefer this method is because the scholars of Islam, they were very precise and selective what they said. And every statement is actually a lesson, or there are many lessons. So we were to memorize one of these statements, for example, about Abu Hanifa, any scholar. This you may find in it a manhaj, a way of life. You may find in it many lessons to follow in the future and to reflect on. As we said, we are going to think about these things, reflect on the life of this Imam, and this requires us to be focused. These statements are short, but you will find many benefits in them. This one is Abu Hanifa. He says, I have not prayed a prayer. ما صليت صلاة منذ مات حماد. He said his teacher who we learned fiqh from was Ahmad. إلا استغفرت له مع والدي وإني لأستغفر لمن تعلمت منه علما أو علمته علما. He says, I have not prayed a prayer since Ahmad died, except that I ask forgiveness for him along with my father. And I ask forgiveness for the one from whom I learned knowledge and the one whom I taught knowledge. Of course, we find many things in this statement. First thing that he made dua and acknowledges the favor upon him from his teacher. He didn't say, I'm famous now, I'm Abu Hanifa. And this is the case of a lot of people today, that one day they were taught the Fatiha, but they were taught the basics of fiqh from their teacher, or maybe that person wasn't a scholar. Maybe that's the only thing they knew. Maybe they told you the Arabic language, the letters only. And then you went and learned, and you came back, and you now, mashallah, Shaykh al-Islam of your time, you look down at these people. This is not the adab of the Talib al-Ilm. As you can see, he says, I have not prayed any prayer after that, except I made dua for him and my father. And this is also the birr of the walidain, be good to your parents, acknowledge their favors upon you. This is the ibadah, is very important. And then he says, I made istighfar, وَإِنِّي لَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ تَعَلَّمْتُ الْعِلْمَ. I ask for forgiveness for anyone whom I learned knowledge from. Also, this also shows that, and أَوْعَلَّمْتُ الْعِلْمَ, or the person, and those who have taught. So not only his teacher, but also his students. He's worried about his students, asking Allah for forgiveness for them. This is the rahmah that every teacher should have on their students. The next example, the intelligent Abu Hanifa, قال عبد الله بن مبارك, قلت لسفيان الثوري يا أبا عبد الله يا أبا عبد الله ما أبعد أبا حنيفة عن الغيبة ما سمعت يغتاب عدوا له قط. قال من سفيان هو والله أعقل من أن يسلط على حسناته ما يذهب بها. Now this is, the title of this is the intelligent Abu Hanifa, but it's not just the intelligent, but this is his deen, the way a person should think who is really intelligent. Ibn al-Mubarak, he said, I said to Sufyan al-Thawri, and these are both Imams. He says, Oh Abu Abdullah, let's call him by his kunya. Abu Hanifa is so far away from backbiting. How far is he? And he's something that he would never do. I've never heard him backbiting an enemy of his. Yani, if this is the case of his enemies, then what about his friends? What about his students? What about his teachers? We find people again backbite their friends, their neighbors, everybody around them. Nobody's free from their tongue. Nobody is safe from their tongue with Allah. But this is a sign of a person who is not intelligent. Why? He says he is more intelligent, هو أعقل, than to allow something to take away his good deeds. Yani, to do an action that will burn his deeds or the righteous action that he has performed, because we know that al-ghiba is a major sin. And Yawm al-Qiyamah, people may come, as the Prophet ﷺ says, this person may be bankrupt, they don't have nothing. Why? Because they have insulted this person, attacked that person to the end of it. So they are given away their righteous deeds. And of course, that's not an intelligent person. So this was a sign of his aql. And this is, of course, the way every student of knowledge, rather every Muslim should be. And this is we see from the way he treated his enemies, let alone his friends. What about his friends and those who loves? And then another statement, قال علي بن عاصم لو وزن عقل أبي حنيفة بعقل نصف أهل الأرض راجع بهم. If the intellect of Abu Hanifa were weighed, his intelligence is weighed with the intellect of half of the people of the earth, he would have outweighed him. Of course, these are statements that are taken in a literal sense, but it shows that he was considered to be very smart and very intelligent. Okay, another aspect of his life is related to the worship of Abu Hanifa, and this is very important because the righteous people, and of course those should be the people of knowledge. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Indeed, verily, those who have khashya, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are the scholars. Indeed, verily. And the most people who should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and likely to fear him are the people of knowledge, because they have knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore their relationship with him, they have a relationship with Allah. And this is ibadah, is very important. A person cannot be a student of knowledge and they have no sawm, no fasting, no worship, no nawafil, let alone the wajibat. This is, as we mentioned earlier, about knowing the characteristics of the student of knowledge. A person who is far from ibadah, from the worship of Allah, to the end of it, and they consider themselves to be an imam, a scholar, or whatever, there is something wrong here. So these are some of the statements. خالد بن مصعب says, ختم القرآن بالكعبة 4 من الأئمة عثمان بن عفان والتميم الداري وسعيد بن جبير وأبو حنيفة. He says, the recitation of the Quran was completed, meaning the person completes it, reciting the whole Quran. Of course, this is something that the Salaf did, the early generations. It was common that be a practice, part of their life, that they went through the whole Quran. And this is something that every student of knowledge should do as well, even if they do not speak the Arabic language. Read the translation of the Quran. You have to have that connection with the Quran, especially if you're a person of knowledge. So he mentions 4 Imams, Uthman ibn Affan, Tamim al-Dari. These are 2 of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum. Sa'id ibn Jubayr, the famous Tabi', and Abu Hanifa. These individuals completed the Quran, the Kaaba, so this was something unique about them. الحسن بن محمد الليثي, he says, قدمت الكوفة فدفعت إلى أبي حنيفة. الحسن بن محمد الليثي, he says, I came to Al-Kufa, Kufa city, and I asked who was the best of its people in worship, and who was from the people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most. So he said, I was directed to Abu Hanifa. And this shows 2 things. This shows that Abu Hanifa was a person of worship. We said, scholars of Islam always were people of worship, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it shows us that the people of that time, they were conscious, that they were concerned about the people of worship, because these are the righteous people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, I came to Al-Kufa, and he asked about people of worship, ibadah. And of course, this is ibadah accompanied with knowledge. Muhammad ibn al-Fudayl, he says, قال أبو مطيع كنت بمكة فما دخلت الطواف في ساعة من ساعات الليل إلى رأيت أبا حنيفة وسفيان في الطواف. Muhammad ibn Zubayr, he says that Abu Muqayr said, I was in Mecca. I was in Mecca. He says, I did not enter or I did not perform tawaf. I did not enter to perform tawaf at any hour of the night, except that I saw Abu Hanifa and Sufyan performing tawaf. So this also shows us that in his Mecca, throughout the day, many times he was taking advantage of him being in Mecca and he was performing the tawaf. And also we find Sufyan. So this shows Sufyan was an Imam also. Shows that these Imams didn't just sit and take knowledge and read books and say, I don't have time, yeah, this is more important than the Salah. No, knowledge is very important, no doubt, but also the soul is very important. And we don't have that connection of the ibadah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was no barakah in that ilm. There was no barakah in ilm. Because the barakah in ilm to bring us close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though knowledge is an act of worship, no doubt. However, also, we have to purify our souls. And one of the means of this is through the ibadah. And that's why all of the scholars had their word of the Quran, portion of the Quran they read. And they had their night prayer. And one of them was Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. Another aspect, after we mentioned something about his worship and his ibadah, is his generosity, or jood. And as we're going to see in this example, yani not only that he was generous, but also his generosity was extended to the people of ilm, the people of knowledge. And this also is some of the fiqh for a person who gives sadaqah or gives charity or do a project. And that is that the first people, of course, Islamically are your relatives, you give sadaqah to. And then you should choose whom you give your sadaqah to. And there is no doubt that the people of ilm, the people of knowledge, who have sacrificed their lives for this knowledge, dedicate their lives for it, with this knowledge, are some of the people who are more deserving of this sadaqah and take care of them if their need is special. Because looking or having to worry about the dunya is a distraction, no doubt. This doesn't mean that a person should rely on people and their help, but it's a reminder for those who have, and Allah has blessed them to have wealth, that you give, of course, start with your family, relatives, and then person investing in knowledge, it's an ongoing sadaqah, inshallah. The student of knowledge, when they teach and they spread their knowledge, inshallah, you get some reward of this. You die and you just do. So Qais ibn Rabi', he narrates the narration, he says, Kana Abu Hanifa yab'athu. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who grants us wealth. This is a fiqh. The person who has wealth, know that this blessing is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from thanking Him and praising Him is to give those who are in need or those who are doing something good or beneficial projects. So he says, praise no one except Allah. I have not given you anything of my money. Now this is not my wealth, rather it's the wealth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what he says, but this is but from the grace of Allah upon me because of you. And Allah has blessed me and you are one of the reasons for this. And these are the profits of your merchandise. These are the profits of your merchandise. And this barakah is from you and to you. Even though it's not their wealth actually or their merchandise, but he's saying to them that you are the means or reason for this barakah. And then he says, for it is by Allah. By Allah, he says, for it is by Allah from what Allah has provided you with through me. Yani this blessing is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am a reason for it. No one has any control over Allah's provisions. So this is a form of generosity. And he was a merchant at the beginning of his talab, and the portion of his life, he would buy the merchandise, give it, buy other things for the scholars, some students of knowledge, give them the extra money and encourage them to spend in other needs. And not only that, he doesn't make them feel like he's doing something for them. A lot of people, they give sadaqah, they make the person they give the sadaqah feel bad, as if they insult them sometimes. Sometimes with their statement, sometimes with their action. But Abu Hanifa wanted them to feel like this is not the case. Rather, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, blessing upon me, and you are the reason for it. So take this and do not attribute this to me. Also, another narration says, كان أبو حنيفة إذا اكتسى ثوبا جديدا كسى بقدر ثمنه أشيوخ العلماء. He says whenever Abu Hanifa would put on a new garment, he wouldn't what? He would spend the same value of it to buy garments for the scholars and the sheikhs. This means the scholars also, he would spend on them whenever he was blessed with a new garment. So he didn't forget them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever he blessed him with a new garment, whatever he spent on it to buy that garment, to make it, he will take the same value, same amount of money, and he will buy garments for them as well. So this also we can see him remembering the people of knowledge with him and being generous by giving them from something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. Another aspect of his life is al-wara'. In many cases, people might translate wara' as being pious, personal piety. However, the word wara' is really used not only a person is righteous, but they are conscious of avoiding things that may be sinful. And some of our dealings are doubtful. Sometimes we do things, we may gain money, and we're not sure if it's halal or not. Is this money from my merchandise? Is this my money? Some people automatically, mashallah, yalla ala barakatillah, and they go and take this money or take these goods or whatever. But this is not the attitude of the person of the ilm who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, they stay away from the muharram, no doubt, and the makruh or the doubtful or mushtabah, things are doubtful. They stay away from them. And this person who thinks like this, it's not likely that they'll find that which is haram or deal with dealings that are haram. The person who's a merchant, especially, this concept of al-wara' is very important for them. So Ali ibn Hafs al-Bazzaz, he mentions this narration of the story of Hafs ibn Abdurrahman Shaykh Abu Hanifa. So Hafs ibn Abdurrahman was a partner of Abu Hanifa. And Abu Hanifa was the one who would buy the goods. They were partners. Abu Hanifa would buy them. Then he would send Hafs ibn Abdullah with the goods. So one occasion, he says, so he sent him, meaning Abu Hanifa sent Ali ibn Hafs with some goods, and he informed him that there was a defect in such garment, and to show the defect if he sold it. So he's telling him this product, this garment is not the way it should be. So if you sell it, then make sure that the person who's buying it knows this, so they can be ala bayyina, it's clear. They want to buy it, it's up to them, that they know, I'm not cheating you. فَإِذَا بِعْتَ فَبَيِّنَ هَذَا الْعَيْبِ. So if you buy it, you sell it, then you must show the person, clarify the defect. He says, فَبَاعَ حَفْص الْمَتَاعَ وَنَسِيَ أَنْ يُبَيِّنَ الْعَيْبِ. He says, Hafs sold it and he forgot. He forgot to show the defect. So when and he نسي أن يبين العيب ولم يعلم من اشتراه. So he forgot to show the defect, and also he didn't know who bought it. He also didn't know who bought it from him. So he couldn't go back to that person and inform him of this and tell him that the price is less or there's a problem. So he forgot. So when Abu Hanifa knew about it, he knew that it was sold, the defect. His partner didn't inform the person, doesn't know who he is. He says, فَلَمَّا عَلِمَ أَبُو حَنِيفَ بِذَلِكَ تَصَدَّقَ بِثَمَنِ الْمَتَاعِ. He gave the money of the goods, meaning the profit, whatever he gained from it, in charity. And this is so that no wealth or anything would have some doubts about it. Abu Hanifa stayed away from that. Makki ibn Ibrahim, one of the shuyukh of Imam al-Bukhari, says, I sat with the Kufis, meaning the Kufi from Kufa, جَلَسُ الْكُوفِيِّينَ. And he says, فَمَا رَأَيْتُ أَوْرَعَ مِنْ أَبِي حَنِيفَ. I did not see anyone more pious than Abu Hanifa. We said that wara', as we said, is not just being pious or righteous, but rather it's when a person abstains from things that the average person may do without thinking twice. But the scholars of Islam, they're bad, the worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they stay away from even the doubtful things. In these times that we're living in today, we need to know about the wara' of the scholars, because a lot of the dealings today, especially when it comes to buying and selling, are doubtful. The person who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows that this dunya is temporary, stays away from these things. this section also, or this section about some of the statements of the scholars concerning Abu Hanifa. We mentioned something about him and his life. And here we were mentioned some of the statements of the scholars of Islam, not all of them. We'll comment on that, inshallah. So these statements, I'm not sure I mentioned this earlier, but these statements that we mentioned and these as well are mainly from scholars who are not Hanafis. Scholars like Ibn Abdul-Barr, you can see, Siyar Alam al-Nubala, al-Zahabi, and al-Khatib Baghdadi. And the reason for this is that some people may say sometimes that some scholars praise this scholar or this imam because they are following their madhab or whatever. So these statements are not from those followers of the madhab, rather other scholars. And there's no doubt that we shouldn't think bad or evil of the intentions of the scholar who's being praised, even if it's from the student. However, as we know that human beings meet at the end of the day. So these are statements from people who are not considered to be Hanafis or the students of anything. Abu Dawud, rahimahullah, he says, based on the statement of Ibn Abdul-Barr, he collected this statement in his book Al-Intiqa. He says, Rahimallahu Malikan kana imaman, Rahimallahu Shafi'ee kana imaman, Rahimallahu Abu Hanifa kana imaman. Abu Dawud says, may Allah have mercy on Malik, he was an imam. May Allah have mercy on Shafi'ee, he was an imam. May Allah have mercy on Abu Hanifa, he was an imam. So we find that, again, Abu Dawud was a scholar. He's making dua for these scholars and imams. And this is the attitude we mentioned of Abu Hanifa before. He was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive his teachers, anyone who taught them, and students. And we find the same by Abu Dawud here. Another statement from Imam Malik, or we should say in particular Shafi'ee. Shafi'ee says, قيل Imam. So this is Shafi'ee narrating statement from Imam Malik. هل رأيت أبا حنيفة؟ قال نعم رأيت رجلا لو كلمك بهذه السارية أن يجعلها ذهبا لقبل حجته. Shafi'ee says, it was said to Malik, have you seen Abu Hanifa? He says, yes, I saw a man, if he were to convince you that he could turn this pole into gold, he would convince you. And this shows the strong argument. Abu Hanifa had the intelligence, as we said, and he was able to convince people, or he was strong with his arguments, or his, when he debated, or when he presented his proofs. In an issue, when he presented his proofs, he was strong in presenting his proofs. الأعمش was asked, سئل الأعمش عن مسألة فقال إنما يحسن هذا النعمان بن ثابت الخزاز وأظنه بورك في الله في علمه. Al-A'mash also was one of the Imams of Hadith. He says he was asked, or it says that he was asked about an issue, a matter, question, probably the issue of fiqh. So he says, إنما يحسن هذا. He says that Nu'man ibn Thabit, Abu Hanifa, is the one, or is a person who is good at this. And I think he was blessed in his knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him in his knowledge. So we see Al-A'mash, he's referring this individual to the person of ilm. Whether Al-A'mash knew the answer or not, he acknowledges the knowledge of Nu'man, Abu Hanifa, and therefore he referred this individual to him. Another statement we see here, that in this example we hear that Abu Hanifa was advised. He says, سمع زيد بن حميد وكميت رجلا يقول لأبي حنيفة اتق الله فانتفض واصفر وأطرق فقال جزاك الله خيرا ما أحوج الناس كل وقت إلى من يقول لهم مثل هذا. This example, in this incident, we find Zayd ibn Humayd heard a man say to Abu Hanifa, fear Allah. So the narrator says, فانتفض. Abu Hanifa, he was shaken by this. His body changed, or he moved, his complexion changed, and he put his head down, and he was thinking. He says, may Allah reward you, jazakallah khair. He says, people are always in dire need of someone to say something like this to them. Whether you're a scholar or you're an individual who's normal, you're always in need, dire need for a person to remind you to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remind you to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this attitude or this adab is something that's rare in our times, especially most people who have knowledge or they have status. When someone reminds them, they become angry and maybe they may be aggressive towards that person. And the attitude of the student of knowledge should be that you advise that person, especially if that person is advising you and there is nothing that shows that they mean any harm, but rather advising you, regardless of whether you have done something wrong or not. That's not the case. This is how we should respond to those who want good for us. So Abu Hanifa says, Jazakallah khair. Another example, or another statement about him was what Abdul Samad ibn Abdul-Warith narrates. And he says, كنا عند شعبة بن الحجاج فقيل له مات أبو حنيفة فقال شعبة لقد ذهب معه فقه الكوفة تفضل الله عليه وعليه. Ibn Abdul mentions this narration and he says that Abdul Samad ibn Abdul-Warith, he says that we were with Shu'aba ibn al-Hajjaj. And we said Shu'aba is one of the Imams of Hadith. Rather, he's one of the leaders or the most knowledgeable of Hadith. He says it was said to him that Abu Hanifa died. A person of ilm died. So Shu'aba says the fiqh, the jurisprudence of fiqh of al-Kufa has gone with him. May Allah's favors be upon us and him. And this is an indication of when we lose people of ilm, portion of that knowledge and understanding goes with them. And this is one of the signs of the last days the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that the people of ilm would die. And this is because they are the people who truly understand what's in the books and implement it. Put it in practice, put it in practice. It's not an issue just of information. A lot of people think that because we have books and we have knowledge, we have this and that, alhamdulillah, things are good, person dies. That's really due to their lack of understanding, because the scholars summarize that time that takes you. Sometimes something that the person may have read 40 hours, 50 hours, preparation, repeating, clarifying it, and they give it to you, sahlan bardan, something easy, nice, simple. These hours are summarized because the scholar has read so many books and summarized it, and this helps for you. So when a person dies who has ilm, this is a problem upon the ummah. And then another narration, قال شعب بن الحجاج أيضا وكان الله حسن الفهم في الحفظ. Whoever said that he had good understanding and good memorization. And this is one of the narrations related to Abu Hanifa رحمه الله. Ibn Taymiyyah رحمه الله تعالى, he says إن أبا حنيفة وإن كان الناس خالفوه في الأشياء وأنكروها عليه لا يستريب أحد في فقهه وفهم العلم. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala is mentioning something about Abu Hanifa, and that is that, as we know, the scholars of Islam are human beings, and they may have mistakes. And this is very important in terms of our methodology and how to deal with the statements of criticism that we may read or hear concerning some of the scholars in the past or present, that they may have things that people disagree with them. It may be that they're right, in some cases they're wrong for sure. However, this doesn't stop us from acknowledging their knowledge, their level of understanding, ilm. And this is basically what Ibn Taymiyyah is saying here. He says Abu Hanifa, meaning that he's telling us that there are things that you criticize him of saying or doing. For example, he's saying, I'm aware of this. And he says, even if people disagree with him, and they may have criticized him in some matters, he says, then no one should be suspicious of his knowledge, of his students, his fiqh, and his level of understanding, his knowledge. So Ibn Taymiyyah is telling us that Abu Hanifa, we have to acknowledge and accept the fact that he is a person of ilm, understanding, person of knowledge, even though they may have differed with him. Some of the scholars of his time, or even after him, may have disagreed with him in certain things. However, from being just and clear, we have to acknowledge that he was a person of ilm. الذهبي, he says, الإمامة في الفقه ودقائقه مسلمة إلى هذا الإمام وهذا الأمر لا شك فيه. al-Zahabi, the famous scholar, the author of Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, after looking at the biographies and the statements that were mentioned previously and from the previous scholars as well, he came to the conclusion of this, saying that he was al-Imam al-Fiqh, وسلم إلى هذا الإمام, meaning the high station, the high status in the field of jurisprudence, meaning the people who have reached to the highest levels of this knowledge, and not only the highest levels of it, but its fine points, the qa'iq. And their points are very fine. Not everybody can understand them. He says that the high station for this status, there's no doubt that Abu Hanifa has reached this, and this is undisputed. Yani, this high status is something that Abu Hanifa reached to this level of high status in the fiqh matters and the fine points of it. And he says there is no doubt about this. And there's no doubt, nothing that we should question and doubt it, that the issues of fiqh, Imam Hanifa have reached high level in them. And Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, the famous Imam, or the famous scholar of Hadith, he says, مناقب الإمام أبي حنيفة كثيرة جدا رضي الله تعالى عنه وأسكنه الفردوس آمين. He says that the virtues of Imam Hanifa are many. There are very many of them. May Allah the Almighty be pleased with him and back in paradise. Ameen. So, Imam al-Zahabi, also, or Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he mentions that there are many virtues of Imam Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala. Finally, we want to mention his death, and I forgot to mention earlier his birth. Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, was born in Al-Kufa, and he was born in the year of 80. He was born in the year 80, so he says that he saw Anas ibn Malik, and if we consider that, we consider him to be a Sahabi because he saw one of the Sahaba. However, he didn't hear from them, and this is an issue of discussion. Did he hear from some Sahaba? Didn't. Anyhow, the important thing here is to know that he was from this generation of the best of the Ummah. Prophet ﷺ says, the best of the people are people of my nation, or this time, and then those who come after them, and those who after them, meaning the students of the Sahaba and the students of the Tabi'een. There is no doubt that he is from this generation, one of these three generations. And knowing his birth, as we mentioned, year of 80, is important to know the generation of a scholar, which generation is from. And in the science of hadith, it's important also to know if he heard from the person, the narrator in the chain. And we have chains of narrations. Abu Hanifa, for example, heard from Anas, he heard from, let's say, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. But we know that he died before, he was born after the death of Ibn Mas'ud, and we know that Abu Hanifa couldn't have heard from Ibn Mas'ud, for example. So knowing the years of death, especially in the narrated hadith, is very important. So we said that he was born in the year 80, he died in the year 150, rahmatullahi alayh. So this is important to know. And the Hijri calendar is very important as well, because these are the books of hadith, the narrations, they mention these years of the Hijri, and this is our date. Our calendar is the Hijri calendar. As Muslim, we should always know the month. This is the month, the Hijjah, these blessed days. But many Muslims are not conscious, or they don't know the months of the Islamic calendar. This is a problem. Not only you should know, as a Muslim, you should know the Hijri calendar. For this benefit of knowing the scholars when they lived. And this is our calendar in the year 1443 now. So Abu Hanifa was born in the year 80, died in the year 150, at the age of 70. And many people prayed on him in Baghdad. They said his janazah prayed maybe 6 times because there were a lot of people, large crowds, and his grave is there. So may Allah have mercy on this Imam, and Allah have vast mercy on him for his efforts and his contribution to Islam. And in closing, as we mentioned earlier, Imam Abu Hanifa was one of these Imams, you can see from the statements of the early scholars, and Ibn Taymiyyah and Zahabi. And it's important, and Hajar, their statements are important because they read the biographies and the opinions and whatever before their time, they came to this conclusion. This is important because we mentioned that some scholars may be criticized, and all of the scholars, generally speaking, may have some criticism because of some statements, or some of the narrations. Some of them are authentic, some are not. Maybe something took place in their time. So the important thing is that we have a balanced view, that we acknowledge their knowledge, whether it was in fiqh or whatever it is. And if there weren't scholars in knowledge, then it is what it is. A person doesn't have to be a scholar in everything. And even maybe he was a scholar in fiqh. Some they say he was a scholar in hadith, others may dispute that. So if he wasn't, it's not an issue. He's not a scholar in lughah, it's not a problem. But if there are imams in lughah, they were known. The imams of the Arabic language. It doesn't mean that every scholar has to be imam in lughah or imam in kala, so forth. So this is said that to remind us of having a balanced view in terms of the scholars of Islam. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that was a previous nation. What they did and what they earned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge them. But we should be kind of us and how we will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should have a balanced view or a balanced attitude towards the scholars, Abu Hanifa in particular, because our topic is about him. And that is, we shouldn't be fanatics or go to the extreme in terms of praising an individual. Even if they're a scholar, we respect and we have to love them for their knowledge, but it doesn't go to the extreme where we may deny statements that are wrong from them, as some people do. Even nowadays, we bring them a proof that this statement from the Imam or this teacher or this whatever they may call them is wrong, proof 1, 2, and 3, and they know it's not and whatever, they try to reject the truth. So this is one problem that we find today in the past as well, it existed. And the other extreme is criticism and insulting and degrading and disrespecting people of ilm, especially if they were scholars of Islam and they contributed to Islam. This is another extreme problem. So we have to have a balanced view, balanced attitude, balanced way that we acknowledge, accept, and realize their contributions in whatever field of knowledge. And if they have mistakes, we reject them, we don't accept them. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we have to deny or belittle them. And this applies to everybody. And this is very important for the student of knowledge. As we said, we open the door for al-ghiba, backbiting, talking about things that not your business. And this field aslan of criticism and praise is for the scholars and the people of the ilm. They are the ones who determine and they decide and they make these statements. And a person who is free from that, they should say, Alhamdulillah, I was in that position, whereas I had to say something about this person or that person. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we end this session, to have mercy upon Imam Abu Hanifa, have mercy upon the scholars of Islam, have mercy upon the students of Islam and the seekers of knowledge, and to bless us and make us of those who benefit from the biographies of the scholars and try to implement them. There is benefits in our lives, whether it's in our worship, whether it's how we speak, how we behave, our way of seeking knowledge, our way of learning from our teachers, our way of dealing with our students. All of these areas and aspects that we mentioned are things that we should think about. As we said earlier, we are reading these statements because every statement in itself is a lesson. Rather, every statement may have many lessons. Every statement, or many of these statements have many lessons and many benefits to benefit from them. And it's sufficient for us to reflect on one of them. And inshallah, if we truly think about it and truly try to practice it, then inshallah ta'ala, this will have a positive impact on us as students of knowledge and as Muslims, period. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us our sins and to forgive the sins of those who attended this session. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu sallam wa barak. على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وجزاكم الله خيرا.
آمين وإياكم. بارك الله فيكم وتقبل الله منكم. Alhamdulillah, another beneficial lecture. May Allah Azza wa Jalla accept it on behalf of our Shaykh, our beloved brother Abdul-Aziz Abdur-Rauf Hafizahum. And that concludes today's session of lectures for our conference, Mountains and Fountains of Knowledge. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll see everyone tomorrow for lectures about Imam Malik, about Imam Ahmad, and of course, starting the day off with the sweetness and sacrifice the ulama experience while seeking Islamic knowledge. We hope to see everyone there, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Before you leave, make sure that you participate by sharing benefits you obtain from each lecture in the video, the comment section of each video, so that the video can spread and more people can benefit. And also don't forget to make dua for Shaykh Abdul-Aziz for benefiting us. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
خلاص.
خلاص, if you can end the stream or just leave the meeting, then.
Oh, this one. You mean this one, right?
Yeah.
Wait, جزاك الله خير. الحمد لله we survived.
بارك الله فيك. طيب نتواصل على الواتس إن شاء الله. تمام.